Oh well, no, just recording. So we'll just pause for the call. Just call for the pause when you want it. And
okay. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Nerd to Know Basis Show. I am Cian and I am joined by the very special member of our team today.
Yo, it's Brin. It's very, very intimate with the two of us on Phoenix 92.5 FM.
Yes. Thanks for giving our lovely host a shout out. It's just the two of us this week, and usually there'll be about six of us, and we're all like kind of scrambling over each other to mention something. Box is going on fire or something like that. So it's going to be a bit more chilled out this week. So with that in mind, Brin, how are you doing?
I am tired. I say with my fifth cup of tea today.
This should be worth mentioning, actually. This is going to be a weird edition because not only is it just the two of us, but we're both exhausted fathers of young children. So that may creep in either thematically or because we pass out from tiredness. Let's go with the flow.
When we've been better rested, it's been just the two of us. It's tend to go a weird direction. So if both of us are a bit loopy, it's going to be very, very interesting and weird to see where we go. So yeah.
Well then, I think before the madness takes us, let's do the kind of nerd news kind of headlines this week. Brin, have you been watching anything new or current recently?
Well, I suppose like the newest thing I'm watching is The Mandalorian. And I'm full.
Oh yes, it's a shame Darragh can't be here to complain about it. But how are you finding it?
I'm really enjoying this season, man. I'm really enjoying it. I was very happy to see that Rosario Dawson was cast as Ahsoka in the last episode. The only downside is that I thought like the makeup on her didn't really didn't look great at times. It looked very fan filmy, I want to say. There was times where it looked great, and then there was times where it looked very cheap and poorly put together. But overall, the episode was excellent. I have nothing negative to say, really, story-wise with the show.
That's been something because I've been following this week by week in the written up reviews on Geek Ireland, and I got incredibly nervous when I saw Clone Wars characters kind of creeping into it. Not because I don't like Clone Wars, but because I consider
they come with fans attached and having notions, so there is a risk with them.
That's fair. Yeah,
it's something I said on a previous episode. You know, Star Wars fans are a contentious bunch, and so when people love the Clone Wars. I personally prefer Rebels, but
same.
You know, like Clone Wars is very, very good, and Ahsoka is a very popular character. It's very nice to see her in a live action format finally.
And especially played by Rosario Dawson, who's, I don't know the complete details, but even as a casual kind of Star Wars fan, I know she's been gunning for this role for a long, long time.
Oh, has she?
I don't want to kind of misquote or something like that on the radio, but I'm aware that she has been asking Disney, and people certainly have been petitioning her particularly to play the character and stuff. So it isn't a case of she's rocking up to this project not knowing what she's doing. She knows the character very well, and I do think that comes across in little aspects of the performance.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I think I think that she did a very good job. It's very nice to kind of see her. She definitely seemed like an absolute continuation of where we saw Ahsoka finish up at the end of season 7 of Clone Wars. She definitely seemed like she was still on that trajectory, and it kind of makes sense that she would kind of go in that kind of a Yoda-esque direction where she kind of become a bit more reclusive and a little less have less of a desire to try and help train this new Jedi. And I think it's just really well put together.
Yeah, it's if I could just cut across for a sec, one of the things I found very impressive, because I watched it twice, which just in preparation for this, and the way that, as far as I know, Dave Filoni did direct it as well as write it, but the way her opening scene is shot, it's not the prequel sequely jumping about backflips kind of things. It's more Batman-y. Like, you know, she turns off the lightsabers to disappear into the fog. She force moves things to fool people to think she's other places. It's very much a Jedi viewed through the eyes of a Mandalorian who did not know what a Jedi was. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's to me, I would have kind of described it slightly different to that. I absolutely, completely see where you're coming from with that. The term that came up in my mind anyway a lot while watching it was a term that's become very popular in my D&D group, which is anime BS.
Please elaborate.
So there's a character in my group who is I was actually looking for the detail on this as well, but he's playing a monk character, but basically he's like he's a weeaboo. The guy in the group is playing basically a weeaboo. He has a fedora on, he has a katana, and and he's overweight and all these kind of things. And like when describing what how he moves and stuff like that, I go like, and at this point he just performs some anime BS, and it's just like it always just makes sense. And like, yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of that going on with how they're doing it. I mean, again, like there's certain sequences in this where it's like the Japanese influences are very, very clear, and it's nice to see. It's always
sure, she fights the villain in like a Japanese looking garden, like
with her using a spear in a very Japanese way, and it's just very nice. And yeah, I really love what the show has done to really promote the idea of how of just how resilient Beskar armor is, and this really or like how Beskar as an alloy is, the fact that like can't cut through it with a lightsaber is like it's the only material that it's the only material that they've really shown that can really withstand it. And I think that's fascinating, and like it's just nice to kind of to get like, again, it's one of the things that like I always love about Star Wars is how great it sounds, and like the connections that it makes is so unique and like tinny, and just love it. Love everything about the way that it's presented. But yeah, like I mean, again, it's one of the things that I find very frustrating is I finished watching Mandalorian, and I had a great time, and then you go onto Twitter, and then you go, oh.
Just don't. Why would you? Look, I think the last episode I was on, I think it could have been 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure if there's been one since, but the last episode of the Nerd to Know basis I was on, we were talking about how people were complaining about Bo-Katan's armor.
Yeah.
Like, this is a case where I don't want to be like kind of, it's their fault, because you say, Star Wars fans do this, and obviously it's like 5% of a minority who are just incredibly vocal. But like, you know, it's. In this, Ahsoka is a case where fans have been begging for this very specific casting of this very certain character in live action, and there it is. And I was just like, I don't want to hear from the internet. They literally gave you what you asked for. Turn it off.
Yeah. But again, you know, like, I think it's just one of those things where you just know there's always going to be, like, no matter whatever you're talking about, there's always going to be a section of people who are just going to be curmudgeonly because they're so it's almost like a habitual thing for some people, where they're just like, well, it was a curmudgeon before, I said there'd be things would be better than they did it, but they didn't do it exactly, just right, just the way I want. No,
Yeah, that is fair. I think it's interesting. I really do like. I don't mean to make fun of Darragh, even though it is kind of where I draw my energy from. But it's funny because I come from a Doctor Who kind of background where it's like we're used to prolonged waits for it to come back or being off the air for ages or whatever. And the funny thing is, it's like with Star Wars, when they do bring something out, people have been waiting for so long, and they have a very particular idea of what it should be, either because of their own imaginations or because of the media, the books, the thing, the whatever, that when something is slightly off, it almost feels personal,
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I think with Star Wars, there's something about the experience of it. That's like, I mean, the only thing I can really compare it to is like religion, where like people, and by the way, I am fully guilty of this as well, by the way. This is not me kind of going, but
neither. None of us on this team are on a pedestal, by the way. We are guilty of all the things we usually blame other people for.
No, I am.
Again, Darragh just owns up to it. We don't enough.
No, I am 100% guilty of this. Like, I think there's something about Star Wars where I think it's very easy to get I think it's very easy to get to a point with it where I think it's very easy to get to a point where you go, well, this is what Star Wars is. This is what it's all about.
Yeah.
And you're probably wrong, but to you, it's like, this is what it's all about. Like, I remember I was talking with a friend of mine who has no problems with the newer films that have come out. And I was just like, okay, well, I disagree, and he was going, but like, why he said, like, well, sure, do you think they're better films than like the prequels? And I was like, well, I said, like, they are like on a technical level, obviously they're better films. Like, you can't say that they're not. Their pacing is better, the acting is much better, special effects look better, the score is probably the only area where you might have an argument that the prequel trilogy is better, but that's about it. But the lore is terrible in the new ones for me, and I love lore, and that's what the prequels gave me. I would say, like, if what you're looking for is just like to be bludgeoned with lore, the prequels are great in that regard, but lore does not make a good film, and that's one of the critical problems and critical failures of those films. But it's just like, that's the problem too, is that when you get lore, the more lore you get, the more easy it is for it to break, and I think that's probably like one of the things that's like different between Star Wars and a lot of its I get like its peers, I want to say, instead of competition. So like, if we're comparing Star Wars to the likes of Star Trek, Stargate, Doctor Who, like, first of all, most of them, their bread and butter was television rather than films. Like Stargate obviously started off as a film, but almost all of its lore and stuff was done through TV instead. Whereas like Star Wars is like the only one that really, like, most of its lore came from novelizations and from video games.
Yeah.
And comics to an extent as well. But like, I mean, most people aren't going to consume that, but like, if you were a fan of Stargate, it was very easy to get up to date on everything that's happening. So most people have like a very combined understanding of what the Stargate lore is, and it's a lot harder to break Stargate lore because it's so well established, and most TV based stuff is in that realm. Whereas, like, I mean, put it this way, there are books, there were books published for Star Wars between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. And those books technically aren't canon anymore. Even though there's too many things that happen to them that just don't jibe with stuff that happens later. Like, because again, there's just stuff that they didn't know was gonna be done, like Luke and Leia being siblings. And,
yeah. Okay.
you know,
I was thinking, what did Chewbacca do? What happened in the?
what? But you know, like
he
stuff
became
like
a
that
Jedi
came-
Knight and forgot.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, but stuff like that came up, and it changes understanding, because with films, you kind of have to drag and drop stuff a lot more. And you know, if especially when you have a fan base that like has so personally attached themselves and imprinted themselves on Star Wars. You know, when you throw things up, because like when again, like you see it, like I mean, you see it all. Like if you go through the way the fan base reacted to certain things, people hated the idea that the Ewoks were a critical reason why the Empire fell. They hate that idea. It's because you know the Empire is like this amazing, almost unstoppable villain faction, and they're beaten by teddy bears that are like 3 foot high.
Those teddy bears are vicious.
They are vicious, but do you know what I mean? It's just one of those things where like it's a bit for people who really like the direction that went in after Empire Strikes Back, and some people hated Empire Strikes Back as well.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Movies with Mikey does a really good on YouTube. Does a really good breakdown of like just reading the Star Wars reviews of each movie as they come out. Yeah. And yeah, Empire gets slammed in a huge way. And now it's like kind of everyone does it. Same with the Star Trek shows, actually. It's really fascinating to now it's not easy, but it's really fascinating to go back to reviews of like the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager. Yeah. These things we consider staples that were just not welcome when they turned up, you know?
Yeah. But it's, I mean, even doing with something outside of science fiction, like look at the monorail episode from the Simpsons.
Yes, that's a good example.
A very tepid, lukewarm reception when it came out, and now people consider it to be, you know, if like one of, if not the very best Simpsons episode ever made.
One of the most quotable, certainly. Yeah.
And I mean, that's one of the. I mean, like, in almost any top 5, almost any top 10 list of best Simpsons episodes worth its salt, it's going to be listed, you know, and like it's, you know, it's that kind of thing though. Like, and I think with Star Wars, it's very easy for people to fill in the blanks. And like again, like when you see it. If you look at any criticism that came out for Episode 1. Outside of like anything on like a technical storytelling level, the first thing people point to of hating, and I mean outright hating, the people like, you know, people will point to the midichlorians being the worst thing in that film.
Really? I would have thought it was Jar Jar.
Oh, but again, that's a like I mean,
I see. In terms of your example of things, yeah, and I noticed the midichlorians snuck their way into the Mandalorian, and that did give me a chuckle.
Yeah, like it, but this is the thing, like it's you know, like it's one of the, because like again, like that's an example of like really bad lore, because it kind of demystifies the idea of what the Force is, that it's just, you know, it just this arbitrary
it's
number.
like the X-Men, you're born with it or you're not, and that kind of stuff. Or
like, you know, power levels in Dragon Ball Z.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because that was, in a weird way, I don't mean to contradict your argument about canon and stuff, but the new prequel films suffer to some degree from a need to include all of the extended media and video game stuff that has been added to Star Wars, like that weird bit where Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon just zip forward, because that's something Jedis can do in video games and all that.
Yeah, force speed.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And like, yeah, it's one of those things, like they do it there, but Obi-Wan didn't do it when he needed to catch up to Darth Maul fighting Qui-Gon.
Oh no, you know, I'm with Obi-Wan on that one. You don't want to go like Baz Luhrmann speed into a laser grid, like, you know, no one wants that in like a PG movie.
There's a great fan edit someone made where like it's like a 5-second clip where it's called like, what if Obi-Wan used force speed, and basically he clears all those laser gate things, right? Yeah. But then he can't slow down and goes straight into the hole.
That was one of my favorite, not to go too off topic, but back when I had the Phantom Menace PC game, that was my favorite thing about the game, which was just running into the last fight, like all this epic, Qui-Gon's dead, you're ready for your showdown, force push Maul into the pit, the game doesn't stop you.
No. No, it doesn't.
Because they didn't know how to make games back then.
No. The oh man, but like I mean that I still maintain that like the that lightsaber fight between Maul and Obi-Wan is like the best lightsaber fight that's ever been committed to film.
I would agree too. I think
damn good.
Like the Attack of the Clones is a bit too kind of clunky, and then the Revenge of the Sith is like a wee bit too long. I think it just hits the sweet spot. But my question is, to circle back to The Mandalorian, how come you find the way Ahsoka is represented in Episode 5 to be weeby, or whatever term you used, whereas the Phantom Menace fight, which you could easily add speed lines to and nothing would change,
totally. Yeah,
is fine?
It's, again, like I'm not saying that is like a negative.
Okay.
It's very again, it's just like there's clearly an anime influence on it, and like I mean, again, like it's one of those things where like, yeah, I say it's anime BS. I don't mean that. I mean that very affectionately.
Oh, okay. I think that's where we're getting our wires crossed. Yeah.
I don't mean that negatively. Like I love, like again, like anime BS is fun. I mean, for God's sake, I love Dragon Ball Z. Do you think?
Well, I was gonna say you picked a good week where Kev and Lisa were in here to break out that terminology.
Yeah, exactly. But again, like I mean, they know exactly what I mean when I say like there's anime BS going on here. Like.
Yeah, I get what you mean now, and I love the fact that in that episode, the Mandalorian now, the Ahsoka episode, because its influences are clearly like Western films and Eastern everything, and so you have side to side, you have a very kind of samurai type sword fight with a spear, and then you have a Western quick draw intercut with it, and you've even got the contrast of a garden setting and like a deserted shanty town for their respective settings. And I just, honestly, I don't know how the last 3 episodes are going to top that. That's a really great embodiment of what The Mandalorian as a concept is,
Well, yeah, I mean, it's this wonderful, again, but this is what like was such a good thing about Star Wars initially, was that it was this wonderful culture shock between Eastern influences and Western influences, and just smushing them together. And Star Wars came out, and it's very much like I mean, like again, like Star Wars was very much asking the question, what happens when you cross Flash Gordon with Akira Kurosawa? And Star Wars is the answer.
Yes.
But it's but that's very much what like I mean that I think with each one of these films, with each one of these episodes, they all have a different look and feel this season. Like this season more than last season. Last season definitely had a different like feel every episode, but not so much on look. I think this season has really stepped up its game in terms of trying to make every episode feel very, very unique.
Because we've had a horror episode, we've had a Mandalorian group episode, we've had a Dragon Quest episode. Yeah. We've had like a kind of infiltrate the base. I've seen a lot of people complaining about the most recent 5 episodes online, and I don't want to kind of act superior or anything, but I think it's more that they're suffering from the shock of the Mandalorian existing having worn off. Because I do think this is stronger so far than the last series. And the last series was good, don't get me wrong. But I do think that there's more imagination in this series, certainly.
Yeah, but that's essentially what I was saying. Like, I think there has been a lot more imagination this season. I think they've been a bit more... I think they let people soak themselves in and immerse them into the idea of what the Mandalorian is in season 1. And now they're going, well, now we have you. So now we're
we're going to get weird.
Well, not even we're going to get weird, but now we're really going to start taking you on a very very enjoyable journey with like a heavy amount of fan service thrown in for good measure, know. But like,
well, there's fan service and there's fan service. Like, I would consider having what was it, Anakin's pod racer be the engine for your man's ship. A certain type of fan service, and then somehow Palpatine returned being a different type of fan service.
Yeah, but even within the context of the show, like I mean, like yeah, Anakin's pod racer being the drivetrain for the ship is one thing, but then also having a bit of a shot where you go, maybe Boba Fett's back,
Yeah.
There are different kinds of fan service. Them bringing in the again, having Ahsoka there is great for the backdrop of it. She name dropped Thrawn, which as people who are on the show is always just a name I love to hear.
I'm genuinely, because now the cat's out of, I suppose this is going out on Saturday, it's been a week since it came out, but I'm wondering, I'm getting the feeling that they're trying to not set up episode 7, as it were, but create an entire set of stories which have our own rise and fall before all that goes down. Because I noticed they called the First Order as in the next age or something like that. So I think they're discreetly trying to put their distance from the films, which I can understand. But
this basically comes across as it's basically Star Wars Rebels, but bridging the gap between episode 6 and 7.
Yeah.
Whereas like Rebels was kind of like, like a sequel series to Clone Wars, but also being that bridging gap between thing. And like again, like it'd be great if we got to see Ezra show up at some point. That would be awesome. Or I'd be happy to see anyone from Rebels show up in the show at some point. That'd be great.
Yeah, but you don't want to go, because this is what I was saying about legacy character stuff. You don't want to bring in that stuff too quickly and too clumsily to the point that someone who just rocked up to see the Mandalorian reasonably enough with their Baby Yoda t-shirt and whatever is suddenly having to scroll through Disney Plus and watch 4 series of this to know what's going on. I think the Ahsoka and the Bo-Katan episodes were really good at just being themselves, but I just see that on the horizon, and I hope they kind of do that well.
But that's actually an interesting threat that you bring up, because I don't know if you've ever seen Young Justice. But Young Justice basically ran into a very similar problem.
Which one was this now?
Young Justice was like its own. It was kind of like its own separate universe to the mainline DC universe. So it could tell.
Oh, like the Ultimate Marvel line, that kind of thing.
Similar but different.
Okay.
Basically it was just like it was a TV series on Cartoon Network. And then it got picked up for its 3rd season. It got cancelled, and then like years later got brought back for whatever the DC streaming service was before that got nuked. And basically like what that show did was like in its first series, it basically was kind of setting up like a Teen Titans type of team. So you had Superboy, you had Dick Grayson as Robin as a 12-year-old, Kid Flash, Wally West, Miss Marvel, Artemis. That was where she was created first, and then Aqualad as well, who was another original character for it. And like basically it was just them being like a covert wing, and they were managed by Batman for the Justice League and all that kind of stuff. And the first season's excellent. I recommend the first season heavily.
Is this an animated show or is
animated.
It okay.
First season's excellent. I highly recommend it. I used to love the second season, but over time it has lost its pizzazz for me. But the cracks started to emerge in season 2, and they became really apparent in season 3, where basically, like, first of all, they did a thing which I love, by the way, but I get why people didn't like it, which is that they jumped the story ahead 5 years. So they aged up.
That's always a gamble. I think Battlestar Galactica did that too. Yeah.
And like
they're even completely outside the nerdy sphere. Desperate Housewives did that and went off the rails. Something about 5 years just kills a show.
Parks and Recreation did something similar too. But anyway, like there were certain things that like that were kind of a bit disappointing. Like there were certain things that were said and done in the first season that were just never addressed again, which is a major disappointment. Like again, like Dick has this major realization, and this is spoilers, but when you get to it, you'll probably have forgotten because it's quite late in the season. basically has this realization that he won't be Batman, and he can't be Batman, and he doesn't want to be Batman, and that's basically like he doesn't want to lead the team, he doesn't want to do anything. It's just not something he's even remotely interested in. So they fast forward 5 years. He's now 17 years old. He's now Nightwing, and he's leading teams. And you're like, what happened to you?
I mean, I'm sure you could have justified that in 5 years, but I'd like to see it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just never really addressed. But then they also add in, like, there's now just not one team. There's actually 4 teams. And your eyes are already starting to gloss over, and you can see where the problem is, right? And then and there's all these other characters, and like if you're up with DC Comics and you're up with the animated series that have come before, you're going to be able to handle it. It's fine. But if you're new, no way. It's just not realistic. And then season 3, they make more characters and have more teams, and it just gets even more off the rails. And it just kind of like, it becomes one of those things where you just go, well, the characters I'm actually invested in, you're not spending time with them. So
yeah, but that's why, to circle back to The Mandalorian, because it's a good example, that's why I'm worried The Mandalorian will be a victim of its own success. Because the first series, we should point out, came out in the build-up to Rise of Skywalker. And I'm not saying Disney didn't care about it or didn't put money into it, but I'll just say that creatively, their eyes would be more on that than on this little show where he fights 6 bounty hunters in a ship. What
I would say as a counter to that is, like, they cared enough about it to have it be one of the launch titles.
That's true. I'm not trying to say like they snuck The Mandalorian out the door when no one was looking. Yeah. Like, I don't mean to say that.
I think they knew exactly what The Mandalorian was and what it would mean, because I think again, like, I think if you're hardcore enough fan of Star Wars, you know what Mandalorians are. So if you see that there's a show called The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, you're gonna watch it. And then from there, I think the revelation at the end of the first episode is enough to hook in those people, to get those people talking and kind of get them to do a lot of the. I think they knew they would have gotten a lot of word of mouth marketing from it, because
and all the merchandise into pennies.
I think they knew what they had on their hands. Again, it's because like Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are not, it's not their first rodeo. They know what they're at.
No.
And like, to me, that, like, that's kind of why it wasn't built up as like, this is the must see show, because they're going to, it's going to be must see because people are going to tell people it's must see. Very quickly social media lit fire with it. So
that is true. I suppose I could be worrying needlessly, but I do get what your comparison about.
I totally get where you're coming from. Like, it's
the only Star Wars thing that's coming out at the moment.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That, because it's funny, kind of to segue into Discovery a little bit. When Star Trek Discovery came out, it was the first in a new wave of Star Trek shows. And in the first 2 series, you felt the hands putting in all the things that they thought Star Trek fans wanted, like Spock and the Klingons and this reference to Kirk and this kind of stuff. Now season 3 comes out with 2 extra Star Trek shows now in development, and it's able to just kind of be itself, and it's stronger for it. So, like, I just worry with The Mandalorian, like, being the only major Star Wars property going, that people who may not have been involved in the first series may want to get involved and say, oh, you gotta have, like, a Darth Vader cameo, you gotta have this, it's Star Wars, what you doing, like.
Well, like, again, it's also set after Darth Vader's dead, so if they do that, it'll be like a bit head scratching. But
it's set after Palpatine's death, and that didn't stick.
Very, very true, unfortunately. But again, you're also talking about you're talking about an event I choose to believe isn't canon. So
that's it, ladies and gentlemen. We're part of the problem.
Again, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Like, I'm not immune to it. I choose to believe it's not canon because it affects how I view Star Wars.
Well, since it's not canon, Daisy Ridley, because they dropped the trailer for the new Chaos Walking film, with her in it, and I always forget his name, Tom Holland from Spider-Man in it, and that looks legit good, and I'm happy for her because I feel really bad for Daisy Ridley being the face of that era of Star Wars. I mean, Hayden Christensen comparatively got off relatively lightly, like.
Yeah, I mean,
when he was Anakin, Twitter didn't exist.
Yeah, but I think even in comparison to Jake Lloyd, Hayden Christensen got off very lightly. Like the damage done.
Do you think? I don't know much about. I don't know what the history of Jake Lloyd and all that kind of stuff is.
Oh man, he got like the fan base absolutely tore him apart. As a 9-year-old boy, tore him apart. Like, you know,
really, God, that's terrible.
Yeah, like Hayden, and like to be honest, like I mean, like look, when it comes to the two of them, Jake was a 9-year-old child who. For who like this might have been something that like his family just thought like, well, you've got an opportunity to do it, this is great. I have no idea what his aspirations were in terms of being a professional actor, but
he was in Jingle All the Way. It wasn't his first rodeo either. No, like
but at the same time though, like he basically he went from Jingle All the Way. He did hit Jingle All the Way and like a couple of other films, but it wasn't like going into Star Wars and to one of the biggest, most important characters in lore is a big ask. And with the grace in the world, George Lucas is not a very good writer of dialogue. He's not a very good, like he's not a tremendous performance director either. As is like evidenced by everything he's made. Like he's not, I love what George has done to create, like I love the worlds he's created, but I mean, man, his dialogue has always been pretty poor.
Yeah, it's you're right, because I saw the SF Debris full detailed breakdown of the making of the Star Wars movies on his site, and like just like you can tell
Ford had to rewrite all of his lines.
Well, that explains a lot. But like you just get the like it doesn't surprise me at all that Attack of the Clones, I know it's a different film, was a first draft that made it to production. And like there were so many hands, not to take away from Lucas's kind of input obviously, but there were so many hands in the writing of the first 3 films that made Star Wars successful. And by the time you reach A Phantom Menace, his success has been proven, and there's less people who can save him from himself,
Yeah, but again, it's that thing of like there was a lot less people editing what he was doing, and it shows. I mean, again, like the first Death Star battle is good because his wife edited it, because his pass on it was awful, like absolutely painful to watch.
I've never watched it. Where can you find it? Like,
I saw like clips of it on YouTube, and like it just basically like, I mean, it goes like, I want to say 20 seconds where it's just Luke, where you're inside Luke's cockpit with Luke and he's flying, and nothing happens. It's just him there flying, and just like, what are you doing? Like, what is this?
Actually, that was, I'm sure you'll know this already, but for the benefit of the listeners, like, they added the fact that like the Death Star was coming to Yavin and going to blow them up on like a time limit in editing. Yeah. Like, there's even like kind of shots where it tells it's all done in like voiceover, and like there were supposed to be 3 Death Star trench runs and they edited it down to 1. It's amazing how many ways Star Wars accidentally got saved,
Absolutely. And like, again, it's one of those things where like, and like a lot of those kind of elements made it into the prequels, and I think that's also like where a lot of the damage is done, because people, like I think Natalie Portman's a very, very good actress, but you can really see how not very good the dialogue is with her speaking. And like, again, I feel for Hayden Christensen, because there's not an actor alive, I think, who could have made his dialogue in Attack of the Clones good.
Yeah, it's you can feel the strain, especially in Attack of the Clones, of them trying to make it make sense while they're filming. Like in like the one I always go to is there's a scene where Anakin and Padme are like talking and she's about like packing her bags or something.
Yeah.
And they cycle from Padme says, I don't want to go. And then Anakin says, sometimes you have to go because it's a responsible thing to do. And then she says, oh, you've become very mature, which cycles into Anakin. This is the same scene, by the way.
Yeah.
Anakin complaining that Obi-Wan tells him what to do.
Yeah.
Contradicting the advice he just gave Padme 10 seconds ago. And then they circle into him trying to flirt. And you're like, human beings don't, even in a sci-fi setting, human beings don't do this.
No.
Like, they're not listening, like, the characters are not listening to the words they're saying.
No. But I think for me, anyway, what I found overwhelmingly the most frustrating thing about episode 2 is how painful those scenes are because of moments like that, and how so damn good was the Camino storyline.
Yeah, it's like
it's night and day. Like, it's night and day, and I just can't. It's one of those things where I just can't get over it, because like those are like the stuff that he does with Obi-Wan and that the Camino storyline is so straightforward. There's no emotional ebb and flow to it. It just kind of moves along at this mystery story, and it's great, and it's fun, and it it's very much Star Wars to me. And the melodrama is Star Wars too. It's just that oh man, I mean, like those moments, there were moments where you could see that the actors really did nail this scene, even if the dialogue didn't help them. But the dialogue really didn't help them a lot of the time.
It's an uphill struggle completely. And you just feel for because I especially feel for Kristen, because you can talk about Portman, but at the very least she had a consistent character across 3 movies. Christensen has the unenviable task of portraying both a teenager who is whiny and petulant to his teacher in the Wesley Crusher fashion, who also has to be a Han Solo swooning the heroine. And they're both difficult tasks, and you can't do the two at the same time. At least with Wesley, they knew he wasn't Han Solo. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think again, it's that thing of as you were saying, Padme is a consistent character. Anakin didn't have a consistent scene.
Oh, it's so harsh. I mean, it's pick your poison, isn't it? Because I don't want to bash old Star Wars things all day, but
it's really fun to do though.
There are people out there who make their living off it, I'm sure. But it's pick your poison. The sequels are incredibly technically competent and well acted and well written in the sense that the dialogue is good
in the beat to beat moments of it. It is well written. It's just those films are the way I put it is the prequels are great lore, bad films.
Yeah.
The sequels are bad lore, good films.
Yeah, it really depends kind of what you bring to it. But
it's one of those things where I would say if you're when you're 7, 8, 9 movies deep into a film, you can't afford to have bad lore. It'd be it would be the same thing as being 7, 8, 9 seasons deep into a show and having bad lore. It just, you can't do it because you're basically giving a middle finger to the good lore that came before it. By going, and again, there's when it comes to my misgivings to the sequels, I can talk all day about it because it's fun. It's it's fun and easy to do. But when it comes to the when it comes to the way, when it comes to the way that the prequels make me feel, it's I really like the lore here. I like the idea. Like, I love that there was a Darth Plagueis the Wise.
Yeah.
I love that idea, but I don't like hearing about how shit sand is. Like,
the sand thing is kind of the easiest target, but that's actually, it's worth pointing out. Attack of the Clones is the only of the prequels where Lucas has a co-writer. Yeah. And I don't have his name to hand, but I feel really bad for that co-writer because compared at least to the Phantom Menace, you get a sense that this new writer is trying to inject something into it that the Phantom Menace didn't. The Phantom Menace was a video game, effectively.
Oh yeah.
The dialogue, none of the dialogue was character driven or informed backstory. It is literally situation.
The dialogue as well in that film is so uninteresting.
Yeah.
Like the film has like that film, I think of all of them, especially in a modern viewing, like 20 years later, is so hard to watch because it's just like, because it's basically everything a bad story. It does everything a bad story does, which is so this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and so on. There's never this happens, but then this happens, therefore this happens, but this thing happens, and then but this thing happens.
It makes sense, but it doesn't flow organically into
it's a video game. It's levels. It's a level design. It's not,
which made for great video games. I can't fault it for that.
No.
But there's a lot of
They got 3 good video games out of that. There was the episode 1 game we talked about. There was Jedi Power Battles, which was also amazing, and they got the pod racing game.
Yeah, and I love the pod racing segment. I want to give that. It's a fascinating to talk about because the prequels aren't there. It's not like there's not good things in them. In all of them, there are great things. Like I love like you said, the whole Obi-Wan subplot, the battle with the slave one in space and all that.
It's the best written beat by beat plot in the prequels, hands down.
It's Revenge of the Sith has plenty. I mean, it's got problems, but it's got plenty of like big fun sequences.
It's one of those things that's like so frustrating about the prequels is that it wouldn't have taken much to make them very, very good. It's just that they're not, and it really shows,
Yeah,
it's like having an A student turn in a failing grade essay, and you're like, why did you do this? You're better than this.
No, I was going to stick with the college analogy. I was going to say it's like those college projects where there's like 4 people on a project and 2 of them are really putting in the effort, and it shows when you're reading it, and then the 2 of them aren't. So you're like, it's like a roller coaster. Like I must say the prequels timed well with coming out with the DVD releases back in the early 2000s because the prequels are the perfect scene skip films.
Yeah.
You can just zip around the best bits and just like have a good time if you're that bothered.
I used to jump chapter to chapter.
Yeah.
Also, I will say, because before we started recording this, we were talking about commentaries, and I was saying that I love commentaries, and I will hands down say episode 2 is the worst commentary I've ever sat through in my entire life.
I unfortunately only have the Phantom Menace and the Attack of the Clones on VHS, so take me on a journey. What are the commentaries like on the prequels?
So I haven't seen them for the other 2. I've only seen it for episode 2. And it is the definition of pain. It's George Lucas on his own telling you about Star Wars, and you might think that you get something really interesting, but you don't. The most interesting thing that he said was, actually there was 2 things he said that were interesting. The first one was, and I'm using interesting liberally here too. The first one was, so like, if you remember like the beginning of episode 2, there's this bit where you see Padme's ship come down to Coruscant, and there's a shot that's interior. So he was going, well, we actually reused the set from episode 1. That's 1.
Oh my god, that's the bar.
And that's right at the beginning as well. The next interesting thing, and again liberally using it, was that like there was you know that bit where the Jedi show up and
in the arena,
and Mace Windu's chasing down Jango Fett
Mm.
and cuts off his head.
Mm.
George, while watching it, was going, so I would just added in another special. Oh, there it is. And it's like a little spark on Django's jetpack, which is why he couldn't fly away. Like, oh, I only added that in 3 hours ago. It's great to see it in Final Cut now on DVD. And you're like, well, what is wrong with you? Like,
you're giving me the impression that, like, again, to cycle back to the monorail episode, that like it's like George Lucas is sat on the monorail with you, and he just keeps talking, and you just can't stand it. Does anyone want to switch seats?
Yeah, I mean, I sheer determination to get through it, and there's just nothing interesting. There's like
now, but what do you mean not interesting? Is he just reciting the plot, or is he not talking? Like what's
kind of like he's. I can't even remember. Like, I mean, again, I watched it once because once was enough. Like, basically, like, I mean, he kind of just like talked through how things were set up and whatever. And sure, if you're into directing or whatever, that might be interesting. But then again, I'd also recommend doing that with better directors than George Lucas. You know, and like it just never really came together. Because again, I think it's also one of those things where maybe it would have been more interesting if he had someone else in the room with him.
Maybe, I suppose that's true of all commentaries.
That is true of all commentaries.
But kind of pick your poison though, because like, I mean, I've talked about this in the show before. The extra features on the newer movies are so
barren.
I think thought out. They're so keenly looked at to make sure that like I say this about the Mandalorian behind the scenes thing that went up on Disney Plus as well a few months ago, where
so
it's
sanitized.
Sanitized, that's it. Yeah. Where it's like you're not really getting a sense of what happened behind the scenes. So what's the point? I mean, we now know with the benefit of Darragh, all the stuff that happened on episode 8. And you don't get a sense of that watching the extras. Like, and you think, well, surely, like, I think there's maybe a clip of Rian Johnson saying, maybe I overdid it in the very George Lucas Phantom Menace style. But like, that's it. It makes you kind of miss the episode 1 features where it's like now and again, you'll just see them being miserable. And now and again, they'll be like, okay, this is a bit much. Like, almost, what's the point? In a weird way, it's better to kind of have the boring, unfiltered version, you know?
Yeah, like, again, it's just, I think it's also just because, like, I there's so many really good commentaries out there that it just really stands out as being really, really, like, drab and dreary. Like, put it this way, I have listened to every single commentary track for the Lord of the Rings films because I love the extended editions, and I've listened to all of them. There's one with all the actors, and if you've never listened to a commentary, it is my absolute first ballot pick of what you should listen to for a commentary because the actors are great and they tell really fun stories of what happened behind the scenes. There's one with the filmmaker team, which is Peter Jackson, Fran, and
Philippa Boyne.
Yeah, Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyne, and it's the three of them. And if you're interested in how they got approval for the Lord of the Rings and how they got the whole thing set up and made, that's your thing, because they did the screenplay and they did all the rewrites and they did the whole day-to-day thing, and that's great. Then there's one from the production team, so you're talking your producer, so like Barry Osborne, who also worked on films like The Matrix, and basically everyone involved with that. That one was the least interesting to me, but it's still interesting, and they're talking with so much passion about it that it's hard to not get a level of enjoyment out of it. Now, I have no grains or nuggets out of it because I didn't. I just enjoyed listening to them speak rather than taking anything away from it.
Well, I can give you, to tie it back to Star Wars, I can give you a nugget then, because I went through not the commentary but the making of on Fellowship, and apparently George Lucas funded a bit the Fellowship's development of CGI technology because they needed to have CGI storyboarding to do the big sequence with the Balrog and the cave troll and all that, these big wide shots. And he did it in order to have it so that Spielberg could then use that made technology to plot out the Mustafar lightsaber fight. Yep. So George Lucas is inadvertently involved with Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
Which is mad to me.
Yeah, but that's one of the things, because ILM was really they really helped out as much as they could ILM have had their fingers on every big budget special effects film since the 70s onwards. There's very few films that have come by where I go, did ILM work on this? No. It's very rare.
It shows.
But it does show, and the ones that they didn't work on, it's like, oh, I see why. But that's, because again, they're, they're tied in, not only are they tied in with Lucasfilm, but they were tied in with Jim Henson. They were tied in with, so many different big special effects outfits, or even just visual effects stuff. It's not hardly surprising that they were that influential.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I don't really know. We've talked for so long, I don't even know where to end now. On
are we at the minute's end? Are we?
We're getting close. I think we got about another 10 minutes to go.
Well, then I'll cycle back to the commentary discussion, because one other thing I wanted to bring up was The Hobbit. Obviously, is now out on DVD, and there are documentary segments where they are clearly showing Peter Jackson is wrecked. We didn't have enough time. They were planning things on the fly, and I'm not saying you want to see them miserable in the behind the scenes, but you do want a sense of what happened, and I don't see that in these kind of newer type things. It's almost like a sort of political campaign or something like that.
Yeah, well, Disney's always been very protective of what happens behind the scenes. And I guess, even before, even in the early days of DVD extras, you used to get really supremely sanitized. You used to get supremely sanitized making ofs being made, where they'd be 10-20 minutes long.
Yeah.
If you got any kind of complaint out of it, I watched, there was making of for Spawn, which the only negative thing that came out of it was Michael Jai White going, because this again, if you haven't seen Spawn, the main character in it has burn marks all over his body, so it meant that the actor playing him had to wear basically a latex bodysuit that was head to toe, and he's just so you're constantly sweating the moment you're in it. It's very itchy, very uncomfortable, and that's the only real negative thing said in the entire thing. And that's for a film that wasn't even very good. So you can imagine.
But that's tied into the huge kind of DVD explosion back in the early 2000s, where having a second disc of features was the selling point. I still remember getting the X-Men. Oh, they were so proud of their 2-disc edition of X-Men 1, because they called it X-Men 1.5.
Oh man, and they were so proud of that.
Yeah, and similar to your discussion there was an entire documentary on how uncomfortable the leather costumes they wore, and they had loads of footage of them just literally trying to step over a wall knee high, and the suits were so inflexible that poor Hugh Jackman would fall on his face, and these prolonged takes of him just trying to walk.
Yeah.
And that's in the finished film, and they kept the costumes in the next two. So it didn't damage the franchise or anything,
Yeah. Oh man. It's just, it's just one of those things. Even then, now those films are so heavily scrutinized for being so ashamed of the source material. Because now we're so used to comic book characters looking like comic book characters on screen.
Yeah.
Whereas when it just says something so much about what's changed in the last 20 years.
What would you prefer, yellow spandex thing? Yeah, it's funny because you look to sort of 80s films representation of nerds, where comics are kind of on the outside, and it's kind of the mainstream now. The people you would consider the jocks in those American movies are fans of Thor, I don't know how we got here, you know?
Yep. You know, and like, look, that's great. I mean, the only problem is that they're still like, yeah, they're fans of Thor, but they're not going to pick up a Thor book. So, you know,
no, but it's still mainstream culture now. Like seeing the Mandalorian on the sides of 46A buses is bizarre to me. Yeah. Thinking 10 years ago, like,
yeah. But yeah, I mean, like that definitely, like, I mean, at least seeing Star Wars stuff on the side of a bus is more, you know, more expected. Like seeing Deadpool on the side of a bus was wild.
Yeah.
Me. You know, like, you know, what's next? Squirrel Girl is going to be on the side of a bus. You know,
make
that film, you cowards. Is all I say. You know?
I know your woman from Pitch Perfect has been tweeting a lot about wanting to play Squirrel Girl. So watch this, great. Anna Kendrick. Watch this space, I suppose. So before we wrap, is there anything you want to say, Brin?
No, I think I've had a nice cathartic conversation about Star Wars. Wasn't planning to talk about Star Wars, but here we are.
You know what? People never plan to talk about Star Wars. I think there are people who have just realized they're coming out of a conversation that has lasted 4 years. And they didn't intend to start talking about Star Wars, and they're still in that Costa, even though it's been closed.
Yeah,
and they're just coming out of it now.
Yeah, well, I think when you make shows as long as we have with Darragh, you're always going like, I never planned to talk about Star Wars, but you just end up talking about Star Wars.
The worst thing is, yeah.
You know, and like, I mean, in fairness to him, he hasn't talked about Star Wars in a very long time.
No, he hasn't, because we've been bullying him about it, and now, because he edits this stuff, he's going to have to listen to us rattle on about Star Wars, and we can't even blame him for it.
No. But what we can say is, we made a whole episode about Star Wars. What are you going to do about it?
And on that note, will we bow out? We're not going to top that.
That's the show. Good night, everybody.
See you next week. Bye.